Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Sunday School Review where we have another good lesson today. Have you ever thought about the people that's in your background? I mean, family background? And when you think about it, you'll say, wow, I turned out pretty good considering the folks in my background. Or you may say, I turned out this way because of the folks in my background, so I have a good foundation to build upon. But the whole point that I'm trying to make here is God is in control. So whether you had some crazy folks in our background, we did, or you had some folks that was noteworthy and famous in our background, and as any of us probably have as well, if we go back far enough or deep enough, at the end of the day, the Lord is in control of our destiny, and He gives us human will. There are some things that we can do to make things better because He gave us that ability and power on the inside. But God is deeply involved in all of the affairs of man, and that's good news. We have to work on acknowledging the Lord in all our ways, and He will direct our path. But don't let nobody fool you now. He is definitely involved. The lesson today is Jesus and ancestry. We're talking about Jesus' family tree. And our lesson is broken down in two different sections. One is Naomi's family. This is in Ruth 4, 9 through 17. And verses 9 and 10 is Boaz and what he did, Boaz acts. And verses 11 and 12, the people bless. Verses 13 through 17, the Lord blesses. Then we go to the second part of our lesson is Jesus's family. Luke 3 and 23, and then Luke 31b and 32. 23 is near ancestors, and then 31b and 32 is distant ancestors. So let's read the entire scripture lesson text, and we'll go into the commentary. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, Ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's, and all Malone's of the land of Naomi, the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Malone, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come unto thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let the house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which had not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age, for thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, had borne him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they call his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Luke 3 and 23. And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as it was supposed, the son of Joseph, which is the son of Heli, which was the son of Nathan, which was the son of David, which was the son of Jesse, which was the son of Obed, which was the son of Boaz, which was the son of Salmon, which was the son of Nason. And you have a picture in your Sunday school book that looks like this. God, please work through our families. And we all need the Lord to work through our families because If your family ain't no different from a lot of other folks' family, we all have and all have had some drama in the family, and chances are there gonna be more drama in the family, and so we need the Lord to help us and to lead us and to guide us and to direct us with all of our family affairs. And that's the truth. So what I'm going to do right now is read a little bit of the context of our lesson, and then get right into the exposition. We learned in our lesson context that almost nothing can definitely be said about the date and author of the book of Ruth, but the lack of attribution need not hinder our understanding of the book or our Sunday school text for today, Ruth 4:9 through 17. The events we recounted in the book of Ruth took place in a period of the judges in Israel, 1389 through 1050 BC. And this time in Israel's history was marked by the people's recurring failure to keep their covenant with the Lord. In contrast to the disheartening accounts in Judges, Ruth tells a story of a handful of people that was living in faithful obedience to God. The book of Ruth culminates in a genealogy of David. Genealogies are found in literature from around the ancient Near East. Many of these examples recount the ruler's lineage and were intended to legitimize a monarch's reign. And this function of genealogy hints at the one reason the book of Ruth was written, to show God's providence at work in King David's ancestors, whether during or shortly after his kingship, or even after Israel was divided into two. Tracing Jesus's lineage to David in Luke's genealogy, covered part in Luke 3 and 23 through 38, answered some very important questions. Number one, what right had Jesus to claim to be the king of Israel who fulfilled God's promise to David? Number two, how could Jesus be the Messiah? And that brings us to verse 9 in Ruth, in the book of Ruth. And matter of fact, let me go back real quick here. One quick moment here, so we'll get right into the commentary. Yeah, Ruth 4:9. And Boaz said, and I'm gonna just kind of outline this. We've already read the entire scripture lesson text, so I'm gonna kind of read this in an outline version. Boaz said to the elders and all the folks that were around him at that time, y'all see what's going on, and y'all are the witnesses. And what did I do? I bought all of Naomi's husband's stuff, Elimelech, and I bought it from the hand of Naomi. And y'all see what's taking place. You see this business transaction. You're my witnesses. You see, Boaz had a plan. He had a plan to redeem Naomi's entire land. He had a plan to marry her daughter-in-law. And there were laws regarding property. Certainly, it was a big deal back at that time. And that the laws are in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 25 to 34. In general, what these laws are saying, these regulations are saying, that the sale of Israelite land, when they sold land to somebody else, it was really more like a lease, because at some point that land was going to be returned to the original owner, and particularly and especially in the year of Jubilee. And so when they bought the land, they was really leasing the land because it's going to go back to the owners. I want you to read Leviticus chapter 27, verse 16 through 25. And for this reason, the family member who purchased the land, that bought that land, was called a kinsman redeemer. And in this case, when a closer relative gave up his right to buy the land and to marry Ruth, he just relinquished that right to do that. Boaz took on the role of the kinsman to Naomi. You read about this in Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. And then the witnesses were like an oral form of a notary public. A notary public is going to witness this transaction to say that this did in fact take place. And in verse 10, Ruth the Moabitess, here's what it says: Ruth the Moabitess have I purchased to be my wife, that the name of the dead be not cut off from his brethren. Now, what's amazing about this marriage here is that Ruth was, in fact, a Moabitess. She was not an Israelite. Let me say this again. Ruth was a Moabitess. She was not an Israelite. And these two family groups right here, the Moabites and the Israelites, did not get along. Okay, you read about how they came about in Genesis chapter 19 with Lot and his two daughters. You know, it's kind of a weird. We're talking about history now. So you know the story of Lot. Lot, his oldest daughter and his youngest daughter got into a conversation. Wasn't no boys there. They didn't have any husbands, and you know that's in the family lineage. So they got Lot drunk one night. The older girl went in the first night, got pregnant, and she had a child, which is where the Moabites came from. Then the younger girl went in the next night. She got the father drunk, and she got pregnant by him. She had a child. From this child came the Ammonites, and so it's just it's kind of a rough situation there. So you read about this in Genesis chapter 19, and God had barred the Moabites from the assembly admittance for 10 generations. You read about this in Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse number 3. Number 2, Boaz was not the brother of Naomi's husband, was not the brother. So he was not obligated to come in and do what he did, nor was he the closest relative or closer relative. Point number 3, the kinsman who Boaz approached was first in line, but he was not publicly shamed as the Levirate law required, by declining to marry Ruth and to redeem the land as a package deal. He was supposed to be shamed. There was a law that the closest relative was supposed to do this, and if he didn't, he was supposed to be shamed as the Levirate law required. Boaz then showed extraordinary integrity by providing for Naomi and Ruth, just like Ruth did for Naomi, for her mother-in-law. You read about this in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16 and 18. So there's a really important point to be made here. You read what you sow. So Ruth stuck close to her mother-in-law, Naomi, and was close to her just like a biological daughter, probably really closer than a biological daughter. And so now the time down the road, when Boaz came on the scene, he took care of Naomi and took care of Ruth. Matter of fact, we just saw earlier, he married Ruth. And so he honored the spirit of the Levirate law, or some call it Levirate law, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. So then the first child born to Boaz and Ruth would be raised as Malone's child, which is Ruth's ex-husband, as her child with his inheritance, so that the dead man's name and property would be maintained. You read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 18, and Isaiah 56, verses 4 and 5. Boy, it was some laws back there then, and some things that they did back there then in ancient biblical history. That was pretty amazing. Okay, that doesn't go. You can't do that today. Okay, and so verse 11. All the people that were in the gate, here's what they said: We see it, and we are your witnesses, and we believe, and we can vouch that this is in fact what you did. The city gate was the typical meeting place in Israel for any kind of legal proceedings. You read about this in Joshua 20 and verse 4. And the witnesses pronounced, look what they did. The witnesses pronounced a blessing on Boaz and his future household, calling for the Lord to make Boaz like Jacob. You know, Rachel and Leah and their midwives, Bilhah and Zilpah, these four women here bore gave birth to the ancestors of the tribes of Israel. All 12 tribes came from these four women and Jacob. You know, Jacob, and you read about it in Genesis 29 and 30. And to do worthily, that's what the Bible says, worthily, and be famous are blessings for wealth and blessings for a good name. Now, if we don't, you can have wealth and have a bad name. This is all around. We see that now all around the country. People got all this money, all this property, and all this everything, and their name is like mud. But then there are those that have a whole lot of wealth, whole lot of property, whole lot of everything, and they got a good name. So this is the blessing of wealth and a good name. And so Ruth then was a Moabite, as I mentioned earlier. But she was also known as a woman of great character. Now, this is critical when looking for something, looking for increase, looking for blessing, looking for elevation. Character is also very important in the kingdom. Read about this in Ruth chapter 3 and verse 11. So she left, so look what she did. She left behind her own people because of her love for Naomi and her love for the Lord, having no idea what she was going to experience when she got to a land with Naomi that she knew nobody and had no real common ground in that area other than with her mother-in-law, Naomi. She didn't know what to expect. So she went in faith. In verse 12, here's what verse 12 says, and let thy house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah. This is I want to use the word strange situation with Tamar and how she had a child by her father-in-law Judah. So Tamar was entitled to a levirate marriage because Tamar's husband died. Tamar's husband's name was and this was one of Judah boys. Genesis 38 and 8. But for several failures, found Tamar back in her daddy's house. She didn't have no kids. No kids to be, no children to be in sight, to carry on her father's name. So Tamar then tricked her father-in-law, Judah, into sleeping with her because she played the harlot. Y'all know what a harlot is, right? She played the harlot and got pregnant with twins. Tamar and Ruth, both of these women were foreigners, but they was ancestors to Jesus. This is a lot that took place in the ancestry of the King of Kings. So don't ever write anybody off because of what you see going on in the immediate or distant background, because God can, through them, turn the whole thing around, and that grandchild, a great, 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 great grandchild, end up being the president of the country, end up being the governor of the state, end up being a renowned scientist or somebody that can change the world. You don't know. The Lord knows the end in the beginning. The Lord knows everything about us. He's intimately involved in the affairs of man. And that's a big deal. So verse 13, so Boaz then took Ruth, and she was his wife. He went in into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she had a boy. Okay, she got pregnant, had a boy. So Ruth, the first marriage that Ruth had lasted for about 10 years, but she never got pregnant. I want you to read Ruth chapter 1, verse 4. And looking back then, we can see the hand of God preparing her, Ruth, for this moment in time that was impossible for her to see at the time. But then down the line, you look back when it happened, you see the hand of God. We've all been there. We've been in a place in our life where it was so difficult, surrounded by all kind of trouble, and we could not see the Lord anywhere in that situation. But then down the road, 10 years, 15 years, you look back and say, wow, I saw the hand of God working during all that time when I had no clue that he was anywhere to be found. God is always in the mix. And so the Lord's blessing her in conceiving a son emphasizes his blessings of the Israelites and the Moabite union. Now, sometimes nowadays, and I'm going to be kind of practical here, where we see a person that marries somebody, we say, you know what, she ain't for him and he ain't for her. What in the world do they have in common? I mean, she's from this side of town, he's from that side of town. She's white, he's black, he's Indian, she's Japanese, and all this. You don't know what God has in plan. God is God, man is man. Don't confuse the two. In verse 14, and the woman said, blessed be the Lord, which had not left thee without kinsmen. And again, I'm paraphrasing here. Say, Naomi had previously concluded it's all over for her. In her mind, this is it to me. The Lord had left me bitter and empty. She said that when her husband died and when her two sons died, I ain't got nothing. I mean, he done left me. So you read about this in Ruth chapter 1, verse 20 and 21. But what she didn't know at that time, because there was trouble all around, that God was still there when she was surrounded by double trouble. Anybody ever had trouble that was so rough it seemed like it was double trouble? Yeah, you said, my goodness. You said, I can't kill nothing and won't nothing die. And for folks, look at what they said. If I don't have no bad luck, I won't have no luck at all. You've heard folks say stuff like that, and even you may have said something like that. Just surrounded by trouble. But look what it said. Blessed be the Lord. Blessed be the Lord acknowledges that the Lord's actions as well as God's character is still intact. The Lord's actions as well as his loving character is still in place. Verse 15, and he shall be, look at this now, this talking about this child that she's going to give birth to by Boaz, and he shall be a restorer of thy life. What else? A nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, is better to thee than 7 boys. And she's the one that's going to give birth to this grandchild of yours. In general, then, in Israel, grown children in Israel were expected to take care of their old aging parents. Boy, can't we learn something from that today? Grown kids were expected to take care of their aging parents in ancient Israel. And this was especially true when it came down to a woman. Because a woman didn't have no kind of, she sure didn't have no 401k, so to speak. She didn't have no 457, no Roth IRAs, not back at that time. So her 401k and Roth IRA and 457 and retirement program and her annuities were her boys or her husband. The men were supposed to take care of their wives and their children, and certainly was supposed to take care of the women. Oh boy, we can do a whole class on that one. And so this was, I want you to read 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 4. Naomi then, she lost all the men in her life. As I mentioned, she lost her husband, she lost her 2 boys. So her future looked really bleak, pretty dark. But her grandson, Naomi's grandson, as a result of Boaz buying Naomi's land, purchasing Ruth to be his wife, that grandson was going to be a restorer of her life. That grandson was going to be a nourisher in her old age. And this is going to change the game for Naomi. Now she has a bright future because she got a pretty wealthy son-in-law, and there's a grandson that's coming along that she's going to be so close to that grandson, and that grandson, you know how grandkids are by their grandparents, and that grandson for his grandmother. So even as the women celebrated this grandson, Ruth was extolled as being better to thee than 7 sons. Now, back in ancient Israel, that was a big statement. 7 sons can also have 7 wives and have several kids. He's saying that this lady right here is better than you than 7 boys. Oh my God! In Israel, sons represented security. Sons represented also possible wealth, and sons represented a very bright future. Naomi, Ruth is better than you than 7 sons. Look at that verse 16 and 17. Naomi took the child, laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. The women gave the child a name. They called the child, the women and the neighbors, called the child Obed. Obed is the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of David. Now, it was not uncommon for well-off families that had a lot of money and power and prestige and people. It wasn't uncommon for well-off families to have nurses. And Boaz was apparently pretty well off. And so they had nurses for their children. However, Naomi was going to play the role of guardian and grandmother. And she was going to be very happy and glad to do it. God's got a way to bring it all full circle. So when it looks like all hope is gone and looks like you ain't going to get a job, looks like There's some women out there right now. You say, Lord, am I going to ever get married? Am I going to ever find someone that's going to love me correctly, and treat me like my father treated my mother? If you had a father that treated your mother correctly, now, if you got a father that did, am I ever going to find someone that's going to love me for me? Keep on waiting on the Lord. And the Lord always come through. Don't you go out there and do it. Let him do it for you. So it was not uncommon then for as I mentioned, for that to take place. So this was the only place in the Bible, though, where neighbors named the baby. So Obed, then the name Obed means worshiper or servant. And though Jesse, and through Jesse, his son, who would become the father of David, David was the greatest king that ever lived in Israel. His name became famous. I want you to read Ruth chapter 4 and verse 14. God has somebody waiting on you. Just wait a while. In Luke 3:23, Jesus himself, being about 30 years of age, as well suppose, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli. Now, a Levite could begin serving in the tabernacle between the ages of 20 and 30. I want you to read, depending on their role in the tabernacle. You can read about this in Numbers chapter 4 and verse 3, First Chronicles chapter 23 and 24, and Numbers chapter 8, verses 24 and 25. So Luke now goes on to add here some more information, an editorial comment, a little bit more information. Here's what he said, that it was supposed that Jesus was the son of Joseph. Now, in order to be real clear, it was supposed, and he was his son legally, but not biologically, okay? Because Jesus did not have a biological father. He had a father that was, in a real sense, I call it his legal guardian, his adopted dad. He was not his actual dad. You know the story on that. Jesus was the son of God, not the son of a man, not the son of Joseph. But Joseph, as I mentioned earlier, was his legally father, from legally speaking. It's also important to note that in ancient genealogy, it was not really intended to be a complete accounting of the family's history. I'm running out of time now. In verse 31b, the son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz, the son of Salmon, the son of Nason. Nathan was the son of David by Bathsheba, which is Bathsheba in First Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 5. The Gospel of Matthew then traces the line of Jesus not through Nathan, but it traces the line of Jesus through Solomon rather than Nathan. Matthew chapter 1 verse 6. So what was important then to both writers, Luke and Matthew, was showing that Jesus can trace his earthly lineage to David. And this relationship then was key to Jesus being able to fulfill his promise that God made to David. What was that promise? I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name. Who built that house? Solomon. And I will establish his throne, the throne of his kingdom forever. David could not build the house of God because he had too much blood on his hand. You read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 13. So I want to conclude with this in my remaining 2 minutes here, that our ancestry, our family history, our family lineage can bring out a lot of things that we've not really thought about, and can really bring some answers to some of the questions that we've had throughout our lives. And it may be a good idea at some point to look at the lineage or the history of our families, and to see who was famous or not famous, how we came about, and it could give us some answers for today. But when you go back far and far enough, or as deep as you want to go back, don't be disappointed as to what is found in the history of the family. And don't be over enthusiastic about what is found in the history of the family. But it can sometimes be a guide. It can sometimes be a compass for us, some kind of internal compass going forward. But we have to go on also then to ask the Lord even after finding this information out, to lead us and guide us and to direct our path, order our steps, lead us and show us what to do. Give us strength from the past, give us wisdom from the past, but give us what we need, give us what we need for today to go forward. And God is able to do what no other man and no other power can do. Hey, look, y'all have a great rest of the week. We look forward to seeing you again next week for our next Sunday School Review. Y'all take care.